Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Extra Hours. My name's Grant Whitehead, reporting from Adelaide, South Australia. Now, I am a little croaky, but Extra Hours comes first, everyone. All right. So I just make sure that I had to keep my streak. This is episode 14 weeks straight. We've been doing this. It's pretty cool, and I couldn't miss it. I figure the boost that this gives me will help in my health in getting better again. So we've assembled a few people again, all returning guests this time, which is great. So first of all, up in Seattle, Washington, Guy Cochran. Good evening.
Hey, hope you get feeling better. You're gonna need some chicken soup or something. What's going on?
I know, need something like that. We'll see. It's all right. We'll get there. There's some good drugs around. I need some sort of like firmware update, and then that would sort it out. That's what I need. Much closer to me, down in Adelaide, just down the hill from where I am in Mount Barker. He's down the hill a little bit. Is Carl down there in Adelaide? Hello, Carl.
Yes, good morning from the Adelaide Plain.
That's right.
Yes, it's a nice day here, a little bit overcast, but that's okay. It's springtime.
We're good. It's good to be spreading different time zones. I was just having a quick think. Is there only two of us in the? Oh no, yeah. I guess Guy and Alex are in the same time zone, and Carl and I are as well. And John Wallace is there as well, back again. Hey, John.
I would say, being from Michigan, you need a Verner's. We treat that like medicine around here. It definitely tastes like it. So if you, not my favorite ginger ale, but it definitely can help you feel better.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'll try to feel those different things. Apparently, it was funny. I did Google. When you start feeling bad, your chest is rattling, and you're like, okay, is that normal? Go to Dr. Google, see what it has to say, and it said lots of fluid and rest. I'm like, what is this, mum now? That's what mum has always said. And then grandma has always said, just lots of fluid and rest and you'll be fine. Anyway, now we've got Alex as well. Alex Lindsay, the man to blame for all of this. Hello, Alex.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Good to have you here. And finishing off the the six of us is Jeff, 1F Jeff Keithley in Texas. Hello, Jeff.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Hey, you in a virtual church?
No, this is my cafe.
Oh, that's your cafe. Okay, little arch windows
cafe.
made me a little church-esque
Yeah, it's
vibe.
just a small little place. It's in my villa in Italy. It's just a little cafe.
Nice. Yes, very Texas. All right, Guy, let's go to the first question. A little quote from Alex.
Just a little one here. Let's see. We got one that says hybrid events might work, and that's quoted by Alex Lindsay. So, Alex, please explain.
So there's a lot of crow that I have to eat here. A lot of humble pie that's there. I really, So I was my wife works at a meditation center, and they were having an event, and so we decided we were doing a little bit of work for them to stream it, and of course, it's a lab for me. The person who is one of the founders has given me pretty much like whatever you want to do. I can suggest a lot of things, and pretty much that's why I'm so interested in it, is because I've been able to we're playing around with the design of this. It's not like I can say, well, this is the way I want the chairs, and this is the way I want I have a very specific way of doing chairs, because I used to work on a lot of seminars, and I have a very specific way I like to do chairs, and it's really hard. It takes a little bit. It's not hard, but I like to do them perfect circles from where the person's sitting. Perfect circles. And so what we do is we take a C-stand and we put it right between the two chairs of the two people sitting. We run a line out to it, and we mark where the chairs. We figure out the distance of the chairs, and then you got to understand. So a chair, when you look at it from the back, you have the pad, and then you have the two pieces that the chair hooks onto, and we make sure to measure from that center point. We measure to each corner of the chair, right? Um, and so what that does is it not only makes sure the chairs perfectly at the same, all the chairs in that row are the same distance from the speaker or the center point, because let's say we have 2 chairs here and here. It also makes sure that it's pointed directly at them. So all the chairs, are perfect, and it's only perfect for the first 5 minutes when people walk in. But it makes an impact. Like, people walk in and they just go, "Whoa, what?" And what it does is it creates, it shows that it matters. Like, this is what we're doing matters. Effort, oftentimes shows intentionality. And so even if they only see it for a second, and now when I used to work on seminars where we would rebuild that at every break. Like, so we would pull this line out, then we just very quickly, as everyone left, they'd all come back in and all the chairs would be the same distance again. Like, like, all be back to where they were. And so anyway, we were doing this, but I was able to just kind of do whatever I wanted to do with the chairs, do whatever I wanted, put the cameras wherever we want to put the cameras. And so we're like, oh, it'd be good if it was, we did one before, and we did this one. In the first one, we had like 4 cameras. Second one, we had, of course, 6, 6 cameras for this thing. And, what was interesting is that, there's a couple things that we saw as we started to do it. Cause a lot of it is, it's, it's not Tony Robbins, it's a meditation center, but it's what I call an ontological program, right? Like, the ontological is the way you're being, right? So so Tony Robbins is an ontological program. A meditation center is an ontological program. And so there's a lot of things you have to think about. Paired sharing, you have to think about, there's certain things that are the same components for all of these. And so you can kind of think through what those all look like. And so one thing is that a lot of times, if you don't have enough cameras, you don't have a good camera operator. We had an incredible, Michael Coleman, who's on our show, did a second hour. He's an incredible camera operator. And he's willing to put time into this. So the ability to get close-ups and the ability for for folks to say, hey, we're gonna stream this to everyone else that's there. So it's about 150 people, or about 110 people in the room, and about 250 online in Zoom. And so it was, but we're telling everyone we're going to put it on Zoom. Now, we're not broadcasting, we're not streaming it, but there's a lot of people online, and they're all going to see everything. And it doesn't, and if you don't want it to be in the records later, you just got to tell us later that you don't want to do that, and we'll take it out, and that type of thing. So,
And could the people in the room see the people online?
oh, okay, but in this case, I kind of, I was like, oh, I think that could work. So we didn't work that hard. We wanted to make sure that the first time we did it, we didn't have as much. It was the first time, right? So we did it the way that the facility always does it, which is the screens are down below the stage. They're like on confidence monitors. But that creates this downward look, which I didn't. I was like, we got to change that. So we put it in the back. But the way that the screens worked, we couldn't put them right over the cameras. But I think that that's the next step, is the person that you're talking to. So it's on a big screen, but it's just the panel, right? And you can highlight the one person so that you can see them clearly. You can see them more clearly than you would see someone in the room, because their head's bigger, from that perspective. So you can talk to them, but it was a little off axis from what we had, because we just hadn't, we're kind of playing with this and loading in and trying to figure it out as we go. But what I think is that what was interesting is that by having lots of close-up cameras and capturing people doing it, it definitely gave you much more of a feeling that you're there. So instead of just having, like, oh, it's a wide shot and everyone's sharing, the online folks are sharing, but they get to see, if you're not, they get to see, like, people in the room sharing, and, like, they don't get to hear them, but they get to see this kind of immersive, feel to it. But the other thing is that I realized that if we get better at, I can bring somebody up on a screen that's in front of everybody, and I want to use Zoom tiles on the next one. I was going to try to do it, and we just too many moving parts, and we just didn't do it on this one. It was, we had to back in, pull our elbows in a little bit. I'm very conservative. If I don't think that something's going to work perfectly, I just go, well, we're just not going to do it this time. but I know what I need for the next one. I'm very good at saying next show, like next show we'll do this. So, and so I just try to add a couple new things every show. And so, because the mistake oftentimes that people make is they want to change something this show, and that destabilizes the show, And so, uh, so what I figured out is that if I put the monitor, a good 27-inch monitor underneath the camera, so it's a nice clear, and I've opened up, there's a, part of it is making sure that there's little things that make this work, in my opinion. So you've got a stage here and you've got stuff here, and then we've got two cameras here, one that's wide and then one that is a single on the folks there. Then we had one that was up high, about 15 feet in the air, that gets this kind of wide shot here. And then we had one down below it that was a little over to one side here that was low, that caught a whole bunch of heads on the way up. So it's kind of like so this low one, captures all the rows going into it. And it's much more of an immersive feel. And then on one side, we had a wide shot that caught the whole room that way. And then we had this is where the long camera was. So this captured side shots of our hosts, but really spent most of its time shooting people in the audience, that are asking questions and interacting and just showing those things. And this is the only one that was operated. This was slightly operated back here. My son's learning how to be a camera operator, so he pan back and forth between the two people. He's starting to really enjoy it. So anyway, so those were the camera shots. But the key was, one of the keys, it was funny. One of the keys was that we needed this aisle to be opened, which is not normal at that location. So we had to make some special requests to have the aisle open, because that just gives us that nice frame that we had from where we were, and very few people block it. Although the funny thing is, I've gotten really into, when there's a break or people are walking away, it's really nice to stay focused on the folks on the stage. And you see all these blurry people walking through it, and it gives you this sense of motion, and it's a very nice immersive feel to it. But what I thought was interesting was, there's people coming in from all, there's 250 people coming in or whatever from all over the world. They could never come here, or not never, but it'd be very hard. And what we were able to do with all those wide shots is really give you a feel of what the space is like. A lot of times with live streams, you don't really understand what you're looking at or where you are. And we really worked on moving around so that you really felt like you understood what the actual space was like, with these different shots that we had. And I think that helps them feel, that helped them feel like they were there. Again, we took these, we were able to take their questions. Again, I want to find better ways to do that, but we were able to get there. The key is to put the monitor in a place where everybody in the audience can see it. And we figured out where. We just didn't do it this time. There's a blind spot right here that none of the cameras can see. So the way that the cameras are set up, this camera ends here, and then this camera over here goes like this, and this is where I want to put the monitor. Like, that's the dead spot in the room, so I can put a big monitor up of the folks that are there, and it doesn't show up in the screen. So it took me. Go ahead.
So here's the key question is, we talk about all the advantages of in-person events, and you've got an amazing in-person event experience that's happening there. You've got the other extreme of just online, so purely virtual. And then obviously we go, well, why can't we just do it together? And so the question is that we wrestle with all the time is there an advantage to both audiences to having it together? Or do you serve the audiences better when you focus? And I don't know, but that's the question. Are you serving them better by doing it together?
So generally, I would say that someone's always going to get a short end of the stick, but I think that the online audience in this case it's not as good as being there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see a future where we got it pretty close, so there were a couple things missing, which is obviously more interaction with the online audience. So more, pulling them in more, because I need to get better at a lot of the paired sharing stuff and stuff like that inside of Zoom and everything else, to really make sure that they really have that, being able to send, and all these tools are in Zoom, being able to have, because part of it is, as you know, Grant, is that it's not just people being in paired sharing, like in paired rooms or triads. It's that the speaker, the host, is guiding their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's and so they need to be able to talk into all of those rooms at the same time, which Zoom can now do. It's probably your fault that they can do that. Yeah. But they need to be able to talk into that and be able to guide that experience. So it was interesting but I could see, what's interesting is I could see how with a little bit more work, we could get it to a point where the funny thing is it wouldn't necessarily be as good. And I think that there are definitely, so there's two things that I saw. One is I think I get to hybrid event to where it's definitely worth going as a hybrid event. Like it's not like
Mhm.
I've been kind of like, you're always on the back of the room. I think I can I think I can tie that tighter. I don't think it'll be as good as being there. And the interesting thing is for people who are worried about not having people come because it's available online, I think that the way we shot this show would make you want to go more, like because you get to feel what it's like with everyone talking and sitting right in front of each other and everything else. It does feel like, you know, I think there's something there, but you're getting close ups. You actually probably in some cases see the speakers more clearly than the people in the room, you know, I mean, because we got big
Yeah.
cameras that are pointed right at them. And so I can see how you would have a great experience in that area. Now, I also can see using the room itself as the hub for a virtual only event where we take, you
Mhm.
know, like tiles, especially with the new upgrade of tiles, it has me really thinking hard about what we can do with that. I mean, it's probably the thing I'm the most excited about. I just haven't had a lot of in-room events to do it with. But now what I want to do is put 4 85-inch monitors, you know, out with, you know, with the you know, huge monitors. I mean, LED walls are too expensive, but monitors now, I mean, they're $800 each or $900 each to have 4 85-inch monitors around them. I mean, yes, to Jeff, if LED walls are better. I'm not going to argue with you there, but I think that putting and I was looking at the ones that are being like offered by View, as you know, has these ones that are there, and there's a lot of other folks, but I think I think that what Sage is doing is, you know, like that, you know, that kind of monitoring makes sense. But I think that there's something about, like in this case, in this meditation center, there's something about bringing the monitors, not making a huge build that takes over the place for a couple days, but being able to roll the monitors in where they're still in the space. You know, and this could be, you know, this is a meditation center, but it could be a worship service. It could be where you can't like take over the infrastructure and have all the stuff, but you could theoretically bring monitors in, have 85-inch monitors, have, you know, 25 people on each monitor or 49 people on each monitor or whatever it is. So you really feel like you're looking there. And then the key is, I think, is to have, so if you have the monitors here, and then you have the camera, and then you have a monitor above the camera or right below the camera, that is, that's anytime someone's talking, that's the one that's there. So if I'm talking to you, they appear in that screen, you know, I think is something that I'm thinking about anyway. And you probably know more about it, Grant, than I do, but for me, it's kind of opening up, like, you know, playing with the idea.
I love that we're wrestling with the gray area of it, right? And just finding what's the best way. I challenge the philosophy behind saying that it's a better experience than a virtual only
No, I
designed
don't,
experience for
not a
virtual
virtual only. I'm saying if it's a hybrid, I still think you would feel like you'd still want to go to the venue if you could. But the key is you're going to get a ton of value out
Yeah.
of, you're going to get a lot of value out of just going in the hybrid. That's the key, is you got your money's worth, whatever that number is.
Yep.
You feel like you got a great value. You feel like you were connected. It made a difference for you. But you'll still, if there's a hybrid event and we shoot it well, there's a certain connection there that you're going to feel like, oh, someday I'd like to go to Mecca, you know, so to speak, you know, like I'd
Yeah.
like to go to the place, which I think is not, that's one of the things. We have a lot of people, they say they don't want to do hybrids because they don't want everyone not to show up. But I think it
Yeah.
draws people in when they see that
Agreed.
physical experience.
Yeah.
They're going to, if they could go, they would, but they had a great value otherwise. I do think
But
that if you do
yeah,
it online, I think that you can design it as a way that it's not, I still think that eventually online is much more scalable. And eventually I think it could actually be better than for many people, than being in person, because I can move you around. I can reorder you, you can, you know, the, how we can do things as far as, and obviously with Avio and you have some of those tools, but being able to rearrange how people are and and bring people in and out and doing those things, you're no longer constrained by time and space, and
yeah. So
that's where I
then,
think that the virtual one steps above and past it, and it scales. When you have 60,000 people, you would not
yeah,
have the personal experience in a stadium. Like, this is 100 people. I do think that I still feel that these hybrid events are better if you're going to put people in the room to keep that number under 300. Like,
yeah.
I would say
And,
that you want that intimate experience.
and that's what Vic had said in the chat. It was just saying that you had previously indirectly promoted hybrid events, small capacity 300-ish of venues hosting
Hmm.
concerts that could simultaneously be broadcast. And so I see that. I think the the question I keep coming back to is, when you think about the content or the experience that you're wanting to create, what is the best experience for that? What is the best way to experience it? And I think that what you're talking about with this with the type of meditation content, it would be hard to argue that the best experience for that is by yourself, alone in your house. That the best way to experience that is to have it in a group of people, and therefore the content lends itself to also, even viewing that online, viewing that or experiencing that while seeing people experience it together, and that can help it, and then that
And
is a helpful hybrid event.
one of the things that I do think that could be another generation of this is that if you have a network of these centers, is that, and we've done this already. So we've done events that are hybrid, but they are
Hubs.
hub. So what we did is we had an event, I don't know, probably 12 years ago at this point, where we had, it was Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver. And I was in Vancouver. So you have 4 locations, and you had, now it wasn't being broadcasted out to anyone, but it had 4 locations, and we had about 300 people in each one of those
Mm.
locations, and there were speakers in every one of those locations. So at any given time, you had a speaker coming from Toronto out to everybody else, or Calgary out to everybody else. So sometimes the speaker was live to you, and sometimes they were remote. And in this case, this was doing over Hangouts. But we had tied it together so that anybody in any room could stand up to a mic, and they just show up on the screen, and they could ask the question to the person, to whatever speaker is wherever they
Mhm.
are. And back then, tying the comms together was a little bit of a challenge. We figured it out. But we had comms tied all the way across those rooms. We were able to, queue all of it up, and they were able to just sit there and talk to the folks in front of them. And that was a very compelling experience. In fact, um, we had them sing between those, but the way we did it is they all ended at a certain tone. So they'd be a la da 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 da, and as they did that, the next one would come up and jump on that, and it worked. We just knew that the latency was going to be a thing, right? And so, anyway, but that worked really well, and it tied those cities together. And then there was tons of activities that are just local to those cities. But I think that
Mm.
there is that the hybrid is you have like 6 cities or 8 cities that are all interacting with each other, and then you have people watching online as well, and there is no center to those cities. Speakers are everywhere, and then they can be, on a continent or all over the world, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think great comment. I think the disadvantage of online events or the online participants at hybrids is that interaction between participants isn't good. The advantage of in person isn't about the presenters, it's about the interacting with other attendees. And that's the type of stuff that we've heard a lot of, the networking that happens, or the rubbing of shoulders that happens. Now, we've seen a lot of that happening online as well. I think that to your point, Alex, with the breakout rooms, the things that you can do with pairs or triads or groups of 5 or 6, people rave about those experiences that they wouldn't necessarily have had in person, because as pretty as your seating layout would be, it's not conducive to instantly putting people into breakouts,
Yeah.
and randomly. It's they have to turn around and move all the chairs and
You
try to
turn, you
work
turn,
out
you
a way.
typically turn to the person that's next to you.
Exactly. And that
And
could
that,
be good or
you,
not. And if
yeah,
you do
it could
that
be good or not.
multiple
And
times, you got to go back to those same people again often,
yeah,
versus we're going to go to a completely different group of people that you're going to now meet, which
yeah.
is an advantage. But I'm interested in Guy and Jeff's perspective on this as well. Guy, you and I worked on an event, 3-day event that was more workshop type education, which my perspective of that was that worked perfectly as a virtual event. It wouldn't work very well in person nor hybrid, but worked really well. And so this is just a case to say that it's not even one size fits most, but what is the content? What's your observation of that, Guy?
Well, that one was really cool, especially because when they broke out into these separate rooms, so there was probably 200 people in we call it the main stage, and then there was a VIP, and those 200 would break out into 5 or 6 with a co-pilot and a trainer or whatever in each of those. That was fascinating because they would share their screens, and so you really got to see somebody's house, if you will, with their desktop and their little icons and their screensaver. And I think that really developed a connection with those people in those breakout rooms. And when they came back, I think that there was like 5 sessions like this. So I think they wanted to get back together because they were like, oh, that's Bob with the kittens on his desktop. There was a connection that was made in that breakout room, which was happening. Like because we would see chat back in the main room that people were just ecstatic. They were like super pumped. But it does remind me of this Zoomtopia stage here where we had these 75-inch TVs turned portrait. And even though Andy was actually there, he came in just down the hall in one of these screens. So this guy as well, Tony, was actually on site, but he was just like a couple hundred feet away in a studio. So that was kind of cool. And then they took advantage of using the right side for chat. And so in person, there was probably 100 people in the audience, but online there was 2,000 or 3,000. So this really made sense to have this kind of look. And then there was QR codes where we could interact with chat with Zoom chat. I think that was thanks to Zoom OSC. So I'm interested to see what they do with Zoomtopia this year because it's completely online. It's not there's a small amount of people on site. So I think it's the same type of thing that we're talking about is where they're going to have
which by the way, I think makes so much more sense for Zoom. Like every time there was a big physical event, I was like, why are we, like your Zoom, it's like, it's like from Armageddon, like where he says, you're NASA. I mean, you got people thinking things up and other people backing them up. And in this way, I was like, when Zoom had this huge conference, you're like, you're Zoom, this should be on Zoom. And so I am excited to see what they do.
Yeah. Jeff, your observations. You've worked on a lot of these virtual events and things as well.
Yeah, we've done a few. That blue guy gets me roped in until I'm here and there. I was very very skeptical at first with most of the hybrid things. It's like, how is this going to work? He has a space that's so unique though, and not just the space in his market, but space in his studio. He has what he calls the big open space. Yeah, I think that's what he called it. There's another blue word in there, I think. But with that space, he would be able to sit 75 people, I think. And so they could just be lined up and in there. And with them, it was more or less of bringing that was a VIP experience. And I think that is what really works well in this. At first I was very skeptical. I was like, you sure about this? And the first event, they were just like, everybody knew everybody at that point. It was a togetherness that was very small, but it was like the VIP of the VIP event. And so for the people that were watching, you could see the FOMO of, well, those guys are having all kinds of fun. They weren't passing shots around, but it could have been with Blue for sure. But that might have been something they could grow into. But most of the time, they were really, because we'd have a camera, we'd cut away from the studio and show, okay, these are the people, their reactions and things like that. And it was actually a really good experience. I think we've probably done 4 or 5 like that were true hybrids back and forth between the studio and that big room, which is not technically that big. It's only like 30 feet wide by maybe 70 long or something like that. So
Yeah, it's
there
a
was just enough
classroom,
to get
really,
people.
right?
Yeah, like crammed in classroom style. And I really thought that turned out pretty good. But having been with him on many of these events, now I could see that market. It fits that market for sure, because it's all
Yeah,
about selling up, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, the enrollment-based events and things
Yep.
it really lends itself to. Now, you would say that was a digital first. They are digital first events because it's still straight through the camera. And so that even that classroom of people that are sitting there that are on site are still experiencing the event through the screen. They're still seeing it through the camera.
Yes,
And
they're not
so
seeing that. Yeah, so that's true. They're seeing an LED wall, a small LED
yeah,
wall that's in there, in that big room, and so they're interacting as if they were in a group watching TV,
they're
I guess.
so then I'd argue they're more like a studio audience, right? And
Yeah,
so
very much so.
they're actually part of the show, and they really are, because you're using their audio, piping that back into the broadcast as kind of, when they're cheering, you're hearing that back in the show and everyone's hearing that. I think it's a really good experience, and I guess I just steer away from the term hybrid in that example because of how they're experiencing it. I think
Yeah.
I really like
And
that.
I do, and
Yep.
I do prefer that over
Mm.
this. I think that the digital first, where there can be people in the room, but the host is always looking through the camera, means that it's drawing their eye into the camera all the time, so everyone feels like they're being communicated to, in that experience. They're not. What's interesting is that it's an experience that you can't have any in the real world, because the host, a
Yeah.
band or a host is always looking at somewhere in the room, and it's not you. In this case, they're always looking at you. Like they're always talking straight to you, in that experience. So I think it's anyway, I do think that Blue's approach to that is the best, of that process.
Yeah, it'll be good to get Blue on sometime. We can chat about it some more. We'll finish this off and we'll move on. But I just wanted to pick up the point about with Cindy and the connections that people make and the opportunity for people to sort of interact online. And I just give you this example that we did just in an event just last week, and we call it the parking lot talk. And what that is just an opportunity at the end of the meeting. So your session's finished, your day's finished. Here's something to think about, even just for your Zoom meetings that you're doing all the time. Be careful not to end your meeting before people have left. As a host, it's one of the things that I'm really careful of. Even with a business meeting, 3 or 4 people, I let everyone leave of their own accord, because there's nothing worse, I don't think, than you've just had this great connection with someone, and then it's like, host has ended the meeting. And it was like, done. It's like you've been kicked out. You've been pushed
There
out.
is something worse. There is something worse. A
Okay.
timer that says you have 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have 2 minutes left. That is the worst.
Yeah, agreed. That is worse.
I have to admit, a lot of the office hours meetings have a timer on them, and so they'll say, you've got 10 minutes, you've got 3 minutes, you got whatever. And at first, I was like, we can't do this. This is impossible, and everything else. But there's something about it that there was something about the certainty of it that I've gotten into now, of knowing that, because my meetings in the morning, especially office hours meetings, are all packed together. And it's actually pretty important that I get out of one meeting into the other one, and not having to go, okay, I gotta go, but just have it turn off. I was like, nope,
So if it is
off to the
that
next one.
tight, then having a timer is the way to do it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not unexpected. And so when the point is when it is unexpected and you've just kicked everyone out. And so
Yeah.
a nice way of doing it, everyone finishes, and it normally happens within seconds. people all leave. They all know where the leave
Mhm.
button is, but they've left of their own accord. They haven't been pushed out. So you think about that, scaling that to hundreds of thousands of people. One of the things that we do on some of our events, and we suggest it, is parking lot talk. What happens when you go in an in-person event and the event finishes? People stand around and they chat, and then they move out to the foyer and they get into groups and they chat, and then the real passionate ones will go out to the parking lot and they'll be standing around and they'll still be chatting for an hour or two or whatever, right? Because they've made these amazing connections with people. So why wouldn't we, when we're not limited by time and space, just have a few breakout rooms that people can do exactly the same thing?
Well, and
And so,
the
so
I've
yeah, go.
been thinking about this related to after hours for for
Right.
what we do. We were talking about this morning. I was talking with the co-hosts for after hours, or, that are kind of manage the after hours experience. And I think that it would be interesting to have either the main room is being watched by AI, or one of the breakout rooms is that, hey, we're going to go into a general conversation. We're going to jump into a breakout room, and that breakout room has, let's say, AI just watching what we're like, but everyone knows, like, hey, this is the room you go into. Like, and then if you go into that, it just kind of broadcasts back to Discord or sends out to everyone, like, Guy and Grant are talking about this, and this is what they're talking. There's like this little update of stuff that's happening. But at scale, you could say who's talking about what, and it would just tell you, in those things. Now, sometimes people don't, that may not be what you want, because again, you're creating a record of what we're all talking about. So sometimes you don't want to have that, but it could be an interesting thing of, you can go find the things that you
Yeah.
might want to listen to, or be able to, I was thinking about being able to just touch on rooms and hear them. So you could just, like, what you do in a real world is you wander around and you wait until you hear a conversation you want to hear. What if you could just touch on the rooms and hear them, and then go, oh, I want to jump into that one. And even just to sit and listen, if not to talk.
Totally. Well, I guess, wouldn't it be great to have all of that for the office hours show to start with, right? And
Yeah.
so really, like, having summaries of the shows, the daily show, to be able to say this is what was spoken about. And really, if that was in a custom GPT that you could question, it'd be like, tell me more about what Alex said about this, and it spits out a further summary of that section, that type of thing, which could be really cool. Anyway, I just finished this parking lot, and then it's done. But the concept was, at the end of it, we say, hey, we're just going to create opportunity for people to chat about some things. In the chat, just put some topics that you would be interested in chatting about, and the audience puts in 5 or 6 different topics. You create breakout rooms in the meetings named those
Yeah.
topics, and now people can choose to go between them. Now, look,
Yeah.
normally what happens, half the people leave, right? They were ready to go anyway, so they're out. It doesn't matter that most of the people are leaving. What
Right.
happens is you still have, 30, 40, 50% of the people are still hanging around and chatting, and they're the ones that come back the next day or the next year and say that that was an amazing experience, which is to Cindy's point, and that is that often our events that are an excuse to bring people together. It's like it's the honeypot that brings people together, and it's the community that keeps them there. It's the connections they're having with people, and so let's create opportunity for people to connect like that. And so by having multiple breakout rooms, they're able to jump around, like you said. Now, in person, when there's a group of people, 5 people standing around, it's hard to break into that. Sometimes you overhear, you can't hear that well, you're sort of hearing what's going on. In these breakout rooms, you have 10, 15, 20 people that are having
Right.
a conversation, and you can easily join in and share and put a comment in the chat or whatever it is. So parking lot talk for virtual events, I highly
One
recommend.
one thing tangentially related, another server that I'm in, someone just jumped into the voice thing on Discord and just said, hey, I'm going to hang out here for the next hour. And then people just kind of wandered in and had a conversation with them, which it's kind of like after hours, but it was like one of those things of being, like one of the things after hours now, it's a lot quieter than it used to be, but I kind of felt like I prefer it. I prefer for it to be quiet or talk to the subject for the most part, like not have it wandering around, so that you can kind of leave it open and it's not like you know, people talking about dinner or whatever. And so I think that, but I think that being able to hear what those things are, you know, when people jump in and start talking, and having it automatically broadcasted, because we do this now, like in office, in Discord, if one of the co-hosts for after hours hears something, they'll put up, hey, these guys are talking about this right now, and that just tells people that it's there. But I think that, you know, again, at some point we can have something where it kind of announces that, you know, that these people are doing it, but I haven't figured that out yet. Part of the power of after hours is that we don't broadcast it, record it, annotate it, so on and so forth, so that people can just kind of have speak semi freely. But it is something that we're trying to figure out of how to let people know it's happening.
Yeah, but maybe summaries is actually a better way than actual, you know, recordings or
I mean,
exact
summaries of
transcripts.
office hours is definitely something that we've talked about. It's just a
Mm.
fundamental. It's always a function of resources. It's who wants to what 3 people want to take on doing AI summaries. You know, as soon as we've learned not to do anything unless we can find 3 people. Like, so you have to find 3 people, preferably 4, to take something on. If you don't, you know, people get busy and then it dies somewhere. And so, we, you know, you got to get a small group together. But as soon as we find them, we would definitely want to. We've been careful not to have AI listen to the, you know, into after hours or other things like that. But having
Mm.
AI summarize every office hours, we'd have no
So
issue there.
I've tested to great effect the Zoom OSC's ability to output the captions. And so so OSC sending out, you can have it where, you'll see when captions works, where that it'll start doing the live words, and then it'll go back and correct. And so, you can subscribe to the corrected, words, or you can have the
Right.
same stream that's being on your screen. You can get that in real time, or you get it as it's corrected. And so that's what I subscribe to, the corrected sentences. And I had that pushing into a Slack channel, and it was of a green room. And so we could see when the client jumped in on these long events, when the client jumped in and started saying, "Hey, Alex, are you there?"
Right.
It, I get a push notification from Slack saying, you know, "Alex, are you there?" And it
Yeah.
tells me who it is, right? So that works really well. And so there's no
Yeah.
reason why you can't then cache that and then push that to somewhere to give me a summary of that.
Right.
Um, it just is, how long is that cache? You know, how
Right.
quick, you know, those sorts of things, and how quickly do you want to, you know, respond to that? But anyway, we're not going to spend 45 minutes on every question, but this is a good one. Alex, I just want to say it's something that I really appreciate about you is, you have spoken so firmly against hybrid events, you know, for 4 years, talking about, I've tried it for 15 years, it doesn't work, you know, and those sorts of things. But what I appreciate about you is just your openness to see things slightly differently, and then when you do see it, and you're like, well, you know, it depends,
And
you know, and now it's
yeah,
not quite as firm.
yeah, I think that you always want to be careful of hardening of the opinions. You
Mm,
know, it doesn't make things run very well, you know, and you know, you know, I definitely have strong opinions about a lot of stuff, but if I see that I'm, you know, off, then I want to, you know, you want to be always paying attention to workability, you know, like if it looks like it's working, then we want to find a way to make that work. And I think that there is, yeah, I can see this glimmer of what that is. And I think part of it was the space that we were in is a really grand space. And I think that that's part of it, is that there has to be there's a bunch of elements that make that work. But yeah, we'll come back and report next time we do a couple more.
nice. Yeah, I quote Steve Jobs regularly, where he said, "Be a little less sure about everything."
Yeah.
And I think it's a good place to be. Good work. All right, next question.
All right, we got one in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana, and he asks, if we study the way a recent historical event is covered, does it help us understand it better? Case in point, does hearing a 9/11 TV news director's comm audio teach us anything? He's got a link to a YouTube video.
Thanks for John and Carl still hanging in there. You're still with us, which is good. John, what do you got?
Yeah, I just woke up from my nap.
Yeah,
So
nice.
excuse my voice. No, I run a hybrid event for about 20,000 people every week. So Yeah, I know where I stand on this subject, but I'll keep my mouth shut. It's mostly consumer based, so not a lot of interaction.
Right.
As far as Roscoe's question goes, I really think it helps us tell and help us understand the story they're trying to tell. So it's more about less about the actual event that happened, but how are they going to shape it? How are they going to kind of push out a narrative about what is actually occurring? Why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to the people who are actually like speaking about this at the time it's happening? I think Newsroom on HBO does a really good job of like showcasing that interaction between the hosts and the producers and every fact check that kind of goes into the background of what happens in a 60-minute segment on TV. So I love these things. It's just really shows off a little bit of detail that goes into everything that you see.
Nice. Carl?
For these kind of, so especially like for 9/11, for instance, if you're looking at like a newsroom's back end, so their comms, I think what you would learn most is more about the people. So from a historical point of view, I don't know if you'd learn anything technical. So as far as putting it into a classroom, I don't know if that'd be any good for someone trying to learn to be a TD, but you would learn a lot of psychological stuff from it. You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about coping in these situations. So there's a lot of human behavior you'll learn. So in a psychological class, then that's a different thing altogether. And you'll learn historically how things were done. Because once you put 20 years on something in this kind of industry, people in the industry will go, well, that was very weird. Why did they do that? If you're not used to it, or someone who's been around that long will go, I remember when we did it that way. So there's that historical kind of delta between now and then that you'd get from it. But I don't know if you'd learn anything from it if you're trying to learn. So if you're someone new and want to learn how to work in that kind of environment as a TD or a vision switcher, then I don't think going back 20 years would help too much, but for the basics. And if you were, you'd want to do something very vanilla. You'd want to do a basic talk show like Letterman or something. I wouldn't be going into something like 9/11 because 9/11 would probably be a little bit too high strung and a little bit too outside of SOP, so standard operating procedures. They would be trying to stick to SOP so everyone knows what should be happening next. But, you know, in those kind of events, I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, there was a similar kind of videos that came out coming out of Europe. So back in the late, was it 89? So those kind of things are interesting from a historical point of view, interesting from a human perspective, from the storytelling of that human perspective. But if you're trying to learn to be a vision switcher, less useful in that way.
Alex?
Yeah, we did a bunch of I won't say a bunch, I don't know, 4 or 5 events with NASA. And the funny thing about NASA is that we were connecting to the space station typically. And the thing that the thing about NASA is you get on comms with NASA and they, everything is by the script. Like everything's a script, but then they're calling things and they're having things, they're dealing with things. But as you go, until you get into the show, it is, we carefully wrote the script down so we would know what it was and know how we should respond and everything. They don't give you that. They just expect you to respond to what they're doing. But, they would go, space station, this is Houston. Do you read us? And then the astronauts don't do that. They're like, Houston, this is the space station. We read you loud and clear, and then they'd go, the first time they did it, they were Pixel Core, this is Houston, do you read us? And we were like, we just open the mic and go, Houston, this is Pixel Core, we read you loud and clear. And then we unlock it, look at each other and go, we're talking space, but there was this calmness and, I got into a conversation with someone about it, and I've talked about it, I think, on some of the shows, but I got into a conversation. I'm always self-conscious with Grant because we've been doing this for so long. He's always like one of those stories. And you may have heard the story before, but I was talking about how calm they were. And because there was a time when they couldn't get a hold of us. We had lost our comms in LA for this. We were connecting for the Star Trek crew. The Star Trek actors were talking to the space station and we had connected and our comms got disconnected. And so they're trying to reach us near the top of the show. And all you could hear, we couldn't talk back, but we could hear them. And they all you could hear was Pixel Core, this is Houston, do you read us? And then they'd wait for like 10 seconds and they go Pixel Core, and the exact same thing, Pixel Core, this is Houston, can you read us? And they would just keep on doing that. And they did it for like 60 seconds and felt like 2 hours while we were trying to figure out what had happened. Someone had just stepped on something, it was one of those things. Anyway, so I was talking to him afterwards. I was like, it's just amazing how calm you are. And he goes, well, He said, we found out that that raising your voice during an event does not improve the survivability. Like, and so that, so everybody's trained to have this. And so we became fanatical about how we did our comms. And so that you'd always just hear this. Like, we had one where another story that I've told in the past, but we had one where the UPSs caught fire because they were getting a square wave. And all you heard was, Marty, van's on fire, van's on fire. Like it was very low key, just this whatever. And we've had
you've said that one before, like it was, there's a fire in the
Yeah.
van. There's
Fire
a
in the
fire
van.
in the van.
It's like smoke. It was smoke in the van. Marty, smoke in the van, smoke in the van. But it was that calm. And we had clients that would always go, I have no idea whether the show's going well or not when I'm around you guys, because everybody's just this monotone thing. But it does have a way of, when things are going wrong, it definitely has a way of calming whatever's happening so that people can focus. And it is like, the one thing we definitely learned is that, you could have a lot of things going. We've had all kinds of things go wrong during an event. And when you hear someone just calmly the whole team just calmly talking to each other and working through it, people make better decisions. It's exactly what NASA said. And so we really try to not raise our voice, during, and I didn't start that way. I have to admit, I was notorious for raising my voice when we started doing live events, because I had grown up in sports and I was used to everyone yelling at like we would be in we were doing basketball games when I worked for Prime Sports Network, and literally the TD is just swearing and yelling at everyone throughout the entire, like, one long swear word for the entire show. And then at the end, you go, "Hey guys, great work. Let's go get a beer." Like it was all like, it was totally the wolf and the, and the dog and the sheepdog kind of thing. They were just, but so that's what I grew up in, and I got wound up, and I, until we did the NASA stuff, I tended to kind of focus and speak really tightly and yell at people over the comms if they weren't getting to where they needed to get to, because I felt like I just needed to get them going. And when we learned to not do that, we found that it definitely improved the quality of the shows.
So, Alex, the question about whether hearing those comms would be helpful. You're
Hearing
saying
comms in general is an incredibly powerful thing, in my opinion. Like, just hearing, one of the things that I think that, like, when we're very close, by the way, of turning on concerts again, like, we found a space that wants to play, and, Marcia's game and Nate's game, and we're going to, be able to do this relatively soon, where we're going to have bands come in. And, we did this when we had a test stage a couple years ago, where, the Illegals would play, or Brian Vander Ark would play, and you could listen to Marcia call the show. And I think that you get to listen to how, especially a TD that has a lot of experience, they're cutting three or four edits ahead of you, and they're setting cameras up, and you can see what they're about to do. And listening to someone who's not just responding to what's there, but has a plan for what's going on, is incredibly powerful. But I think that's for anybody. I think for anybody, it's important that you're around other people that know a lot more than you do, as much as you possibly can be. When they talk about Nepo babies, I'm like, of course, if they're not Nepo babies, what are they doing? Like, if 100 years ago, everyone was a Nepo baby. You did whatever your parents were doing because you grew up in that environment. You grew up with them, listening to them farm or weld or be a blacksmith or whatever. And I think that is, you're around that environment, and you want to, so getting people into that environment virtually and then physically after that, I think is one of the most, it's the way to learn, in my opinion, like, for skills.
Yeah, agreed. Jeff?
For me, I would very much like to record comms a lot of times, but I've been around that sports world a little too much, so there's too much incriminating evidence sometimes, and how things get. I would love that sometimes we would have that NASA approach. It's just in our sports world, it's just been hard to find that balance. But I would love to be a little bit more calmer at times. I just worked with a director I've never worked with before, and I think he may be the same guy you're talking about, Alex. I'm pretty sure. I have not heard that in a long time.
I don't think the guy that I think he's out of he was probably in his 50s when I was, you know, he was probably in his
Yeah.
50s 30 years ago or more. So maybe.
Was he about 5'2"? Because this guy
No.
was the epitome of a little man syndrome, sort of, kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Woo, it was rough, buddy. But yeah, you kind of, I don't want to say you get used to it, but you adapt, and I think that was one of the things we had to do on the show. But I much prefer a friendly banter of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, it's just easier to work that way than somebody going in your ear the whole time. So those kind of comps don't help. But if you have a good flow, like you were talking about, in that, and I remember watching or listening to the comms during one of those presentations with the concerts, and that's a different feel. It is a totally different feel. But
Yeah.
I would agree that even this show in cutting it, there's not a whole lot that we're calling because we're not a director producer type relationship. But I think it could help that way. Like right now, Taylor's cutting the show with, I believe Robert is on the backside of that. The next step is Robert cut the show, but Taylor direct the show, and then that would help. Again,
It always
just
makes the show
create
better. I
more
mean,
of it.
when you're to your point, when there's someone directing and someone cutting the show, it's always going to be a better show because there's a lot of other things you have to do while you're being a TD that makes it hard for you to keep track of it. And the director is just they don't have to think about what they're typing or what they're putting, they don't have to just, look down at
Yep,
at what they're
there's a
doing. They're
reason
just
it
calling
exists.
what they want to see. And I think that definitely makes a, um, big difference. And then having a producer sometimes next to them. So it was the director calling the show and the producers thinking that they're the next layer above, talking to everyone about what's doing, talking to the talent, talking to the, other things that also happens in, a lot of the larger tricks.
And that's exactly the relationship that we had. We had I was engineering, and then I had an operator next to me that was V1, and then I had um, the producer, and then the director. So the director was on the far end, and then that was one of those things that it was a completely produced in the cloud show, except that those two guys were from the company, were on site, and they felt like they needed to be. It was one of their first times out doing this type of show. So the producer, hearing all the other stuff that he was doing that the director never had to touch, like didn't have to talk to replay to get this ready. He didn't have to talk to the talent at all. The director was just calling the shots, and that was it was and then there was a TD in the cloud.
And
So
then
there was 3 layers at that
and
point.
and in a lot of these big games, when you have a ton of them, they're just the producer for the EBSs, for replay. The replay producer is selling shots to the
Yep.
to the director, or to the producer. So they're sitting there going like, what do I got? What do I got? And they're talking, they're on another PL,
Yep.
looking at all the EBS playouts and so the playout operators are sitting there trying to show the play from the last play. I mean, when you look at an NFL game, like I think that having gotten to sit in some of these trucks and so on and so forth and everything else, what they do is stunning. Like it is, I mean, especially Thursday night and Sunday night football, is just a stunning amount of technology and a stunning and the best live crews in the world that are working on these things. And it's just because it's just like this incredible, machine of them. There's a whole bunch of replays from a whole bunch of different angles, and you're seeing that seconds, like 5 or 6 seconds after it happened, it's playing back in slow motion and rocking back and forth, and they're doing telestrator on top of it, and it's and then they have to jump to the next one. It's not like they go, okay, that was great. No, they're off to the next one. It's really even if you don't like watching NFL football, as a live person, you should watch it and really break it down. Like watch what's actually happening there, because it's just an insane amount of technology and incredibly talented people.
A great question, Roscoe. I think particularly the emotional weight of 9/11 at that time, listening to those comms and hearing the humanity for people, right? Like, because it's one thing to have systems in place for the job that you have ahead of you and doing live coverage and going from something to something to something and working out what's going on. At the same time, they're seeing things that are affecting them as well. And they're wondering about their families and wondering about is the world at war now, and all of these things that were going on. It was a full on experience that was happening in real time. People are discovering things about what was happening then. To hear those comms would be amazing, because it would be insight into all of that. It would also be how do you manage, as you've I'm interested in the video that you've linked to about calm through chaos.
And there's also something, if you watch the Hindenburg, there is something about, in some cases, feeling what's happening, like that was the announcer, right?
Yeah.
The announcer calling out what he's seeing and just being completely overwhelmed is part of the emotion of what's happening. And so, I mean, that's not the director, that was a single camera, but so the director has to keep the team going that direction. But at the same time, the announcers, empathizing, I think, is an important piece of that puzzle as well.
100%. Carl, you probably you would know Chris Reason is a reporter, Channel 7 reporter in Australia, and he was on the ground in New York at the time, and I ran into him in a airport lounge only a couple of years ago, and we were getting soup together, and I just said to him, "Hey Chris, I know it's a really long time ago, and I was young, but I just really appreciate the reporting you did for 9/11." And he was really taken back by it. And I just said the way that you worked and the way that you were sharing what was happening emotionally as well was just incredible reporting. I just really appreciate it. It's amazing how, when it's done right, that even 20 years later, I remembered his name, and I remember the impact that it had. That it was quality TV and quality
I remember
report.
his reporting. Yeah, so the thing about Australia is we do send probably our best and brightest overseas to be correspondents in larger cities like London and New York. So that's one of the reasons why we got good quality. We got good quality, a few years later, of course, out of London when those attacks happened too.
Cool. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Peter Belden in Houston, Texas, and he asks, Insta360 has released the Link 2 series, one with the gimbal, the other not, at a lower cost. Sounds like a winner. Likely still without full API access, just UVC functions, half-inch sensor. Thoughts?
Carl?
I might actually get one now. So, yeah, I like the fact they've got one without a PTZ. That's quite good. That's probably the one I may go for because, I just set it up. I don't really need PTZ, but unfortunately, yeah, no API. What's happening maybe with the second generation, they'll give an API so you can at least do some pretty basic stuff, or even an extension to their app, like an ability to do some very basic programming in their app to, a label, looping, that kind of stuff, motion control without, if they turn looping off, of course, it becomes motion control. If you turn, looping on, it just becomes a loop. The other thing is a half-inch sensor, which is it's kind of standard. The iPhone is much larger than that now, so the iPhone is it's actually larger than a 2/3 inch sensor now, the main camera in the iPhone. But it's still quite good. Like it's better than nearly any other webcam out there, so it's still pretty much top of its class. But for the PTZ model to have either an extension in its software to allow you to program it and do other things, or an API, that'd be nice.
Yeah. The $50 difference, $50 for the PTZ, I think is probably worth it. For the times that you do use it. We used it recently on a show where it was a workshop, just needed something small. We put it at the front of the room. It followed the person around as they walked around doing a workshop. It was like, that's worth $50. But Alex?
Yeah, I have 4 of the last generation, and if I'm not going to use a really large sensor camera, those are the only ones that I'm using. And the ability to be able to sit down, especially like in a hotel or something like that, and not have to get back up to adjust it, to me is like it's just like the little, like, oh, I need to move up and down. It's not even the walking around. I usually turn all those features off. It's me being able to not have to go up and do something to the camera, especially if it has to turn around. It can pan and scan inside of its sensor, but I think that the being able to move around, and we've done ones where, it's going back and forth between people, like we have pre-programmed, it to be set up for that. And we can, have a lot of different kind of framing and so on and so forth. And so I think the new one looks looks good. I think that for some reason I thought that it was a little less. It had a little less than the last the last camera. It's a little less expensive. But I can't remember what spec I was looking at that I was like, oh, they went to a slightly, it's the same chip size. So the 1/2 inch chip is the same as the last one was. But I felt like there was something, and I don't remember what it was that I looked through, that I felt like it wasn't doing quite as much as the last camera did. But it is less expensive, so, but at 200 or 199, it's incredible. I mean, we used to buy the Brios for 199 and we're happy with the Brios at 199, and 199 for this camera is a pretty incredible, value, to it. I mean, this would definitely be the one that I would get if I was sending out small kits. I do wish that Logitech, or not Logitech, but Insta360 or Logitech. Logitech I know has done one, but it's too expensive, like a larger sensor. But a little PTZ at $400, $500 with a Super 35 sensor, or even a 4/3, they're thinking about resolution, not about depth of field. And they don't, the shorter depth of field makes a big difference, in how someone looks on a, it definitely changes it. Cause I mean, what's behind me here would look pretty junky if it was in focus. So it's a nice little lights and things and everything else. It all works, gives you a sense of it, but there's a lot of extra wires and things and everything else. And so I think that the short depth of field also protects a lot of people from their office, and people do the fake blurring, but most of that doesn't work. It feels really unnatural, and so I think Apple does it better than most, is that soft depth of field, like a little bit of depth of field without going crazy. But I think that that's I mean, I think that this is if someone said, I'm getting a webcam, I don't want to spend more than $200, the $200 webcam is this camera, 100%.
Eek said in the chat that there was, it seems there's a phone app now to control the Insta360 movement, which is,
By the way,
cool.
I don't know how much I can say about this, but I don't think that there's no API. I think that there's
Yeah.
no public API.
Hmm.
So I think
That's what I
there's
was going
some
to
folks
say.
that,
The phone app is interacting with it somehow. there's some
yeah. So
control
I think that
protocol going
and
on.
the reason people say, why would you do that? It's because once you do a public API, you have to support it all. And then you have a bunch of developers that complain every time you change something, and everybody gets upset and everything else. So by only having a private API that you only give to, to partners, to close partners, you don't have to support there's only a handful of people that you have to talk to about it. And they know that you'll stop talking to them if you'll stop giving them the API if they start, being problematic. So it kind of keeps everything it's much easier to manage a private API than, to make it available. I mean, I think that a public API I think if they had a great public API, it would explode, as far as how people use the camera. I think it's a missing opportunity for Insta360, but I understand why they're not doing that.
So let me get this correct. So the new one has phone support. Is that correct? And the old one doesn't have phone support. So this circumvents the UVC
Maybe.
problem. So what I mean
Okay.
by that is you can plug this into the new Rodecaster video, which you lose all control, but UVC control maybe. But now you can actually use the phone to control the 360 because you're not hooking it directly into the software into a Mac or a PC. So what I mean by that is you could actually, if the phone has the same abilities, have
Bluetooth or something.
presets. So if that's the case, then this kind of changes everything, because now we can convert a 360 into HDMI, chuck it into any switch we like, and control it from an iPad or a phone, which is a thing that's been missing in the past because we always had to have that USB connection because it was always controlled on the computer that it was attached to. So if that's the case with this, then that does solve one of the problems that we want, is converting to HDMI and then just using an iPad the same way we use Mix Effect Pro. So, or even Mix Effect Pro, if there is an API, Mix Effect Pro itself could actually have calls into the iPhone app. And so Mix Effect Pro could actually, if this and that version into the app, and then from one interface you could actually control presets for the PTZ, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah. We'll see where it goes. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Bo Cordwell, and he asks, there was a time where you could only get the experience of a live sporting event by being there, and the TV experience was lacking. Now, the better experience is watching the same event from home. Why couldn't we lead more events that direction?
Jeff?
in my opinion, it's because there's not enough bow cordals to go around and create those wonderful graphics. Because I love pointing to them when I was watching just Thursday night. I was watching it. We were at a restaurant somewhere, a slash bar, and they had and it was all on all the TVs, the Prime show, and sure enough, this his AR stuff came up, and I was like, I know the guy. I know that guy. My wife's like, yeah, whatever. You know everybody. All right, fine. But I think that involvement in that extra bit of graphics stuff that they are doing now, like even some of the replays that they're coming back and putting over the visualizations, and it's just a much more, it's so much better than, the old telestrator way of marking up things left and right and stuff. I just think it's so much more interactive. I've had clients come to us in our sporting events and ask about some of those things, so they're paying attention. That people are asking for things to be better, and a big part of that is definitely just over AR type graphics, stuff that's more interactive, stuff that's not just a score bug at the bottom anymore. But graphics push the show and more so than anything else that's happening in it.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're talking about non-sports, I mean, if we're talking about, I think Bo's asking like, why do we not go to that for other events, in that area? I think that the thing that we, that we see, I mean, I think graphics is important, but I think that the other thing is interactivity. Like, how do you get people feeling like they're involved, and how do you have them feel like they're, connected to each other, and how do you feel like connected there? And the biggest problem that we find is that the massive underinvestment in the into the event itself. So what happens, if someone asks me, I always go, well, if you take your physical event for that many people that you were going to do for that many people and you cut the budget in half and you do it virtually, you'll never go back to physical because there's so much. But what most people want to do is spend 10% or 1% of what they would have spent for the same number of people physically, to support them. And in that case, when you're spending 1% or 10% of what you would have spent, and you don't send kits out to all the speakers, and you don't send, like, a lot of the events that I work on, the largest events, we send kits and teams to every speaker. Like, and now that some of those events had 200,000, 300,000 people watching live. And so, but there's a team of two that showed up that morning, set everything up and run everything. Every participant just has to sit there and be, like, they don't have to figure anything out, and they look great, they sound great, and everything else. And so for the largest events, that's how we've approached that. And that team's on comms. And we've had some pretty harrowing things happen where, like, the ex-president of Mexico didn't want to be on the show anymore, and our crew was talking him into sitting back down again. And in Spanish, trying to figure this all out. So all of those things are, having the crew there makes a big difference. Having good kits there make a big difference. But when we take all that stuff away, and I'm talking about the non-sports stuff, when we take that away and people have all your speakers are coming in over, their built-in speaker, their built-in mic, and their built-in webcam, it's not going to feel like it was before. Like, it's not going to have that same gravitas. It's not going to, to be honest, it's just hard to listen to and hard to watch, and it lowers, I really feel like, some of not all, but some of our lowering opinion of pundits and politicians and everything else was during COVID. No one invested in their kits, and they looked like idiots. We spent 2 or 3 years watching everybody look like idiots, and there's a lot of them still do, and you're just like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can have good camera and a good mic, and you suddenly, have an entirely different level of again, gravitas, that you can apply to that. And I think that the when we do meetings where we control all of that, we see, 80%, 90%, 100%, literally 100% of the participants say they'd rather do it virtually than in the room, when that quality is at its height. And when it's not, when the client doesn't want to spend the money on that and just have everyone come in with whatever they got, that number is much lower. So I think that's part of the situation.
Carl?
So one thing I remember, and I think it's still the case here in Adelaide actually, is that one of the football teams here in Adelaide, the LA Crows, you couldn't buy a ticket to go see them. So there was no physical way to actually go see them. Those tickets were sold out years at a time. So people in America, Green Bay had a similar thing going on back in the day, where you had to wait like 20 years for a season ticket for Green Bay. So the thing was, and another thing is also for not all sporting codes, but for some sporting codes, the rights of the game, so the rights essentially for the game are different at the ground as they are on television. So they're different right holders, different teams that handle that. So let's say you're at a stadium. So here in Adelaide, we have the Adelaide Oval. The Adelaide Oval team are in charge of the production that happens at a football game for everyone at the Adelaide Oval. But they do not own the television rights. They don't know anything about that. So that's held by a completely different team, and their job is to sell, I guess, advertising, get eyeballs and sell advertising. So that's two completely different teams with two completely different objectives on how to run their business and how their business can be profitable. So if you've sold every ticket you can, there's no way for the Adelaide Oval to make more money except raise the prices of concessions. That's about it. So if you want to buy, a hot dog at the Adelaide Oval, it's $12. So that's the only way they can actually raise. So when they go back to their shareholders or whoever and say, have we made more money this year than last year? The only way they can do that is to raise the price of a Coke, because they can't sell any more tickets, because that's it, it's full. With the television rights, or essentially the people who are not there, they can raise the thing by making it more inviting, by making the sport seem more interesting. And this is to do with technology that they're bringing and interactive, all those kind of things, as we talked about, and that Bo handles himself. That those kind of things actually raise the value, and therefore you can charge more for your advertising because more people are coming to watch you, because it's more engaging on television for that audience. So they are two completely different businesses, but I think that could be true in event space as well, depending on what type of event it is. But if you sold out your event, then you've maxed out on your profitability for that event on location. But you haven't maxed out because you can have as many virtual attendees come. It's about making
Well,
more. Go ahead.
And to your point, the Steelers, I'm a Steeler fan. The Steelers are sold out for a decade. Like the waiting list to get a ticket to watch the Steelers in Pittsburgh. My parents have my dad's law firm has 4 tickets, and it took a decade to get those 4 tickets, and they're not even great tickets. They're just in the stadium, but I'll probably, he'll probably give them to one of my brothers or sisters in his will. Like no one's giving up those tickets. And what that's generated is there's 1,200 Steeler bars. And if you looked at the game last night, which we lost, but anyway, half of the people in Indianapolis are at the game are Steeler fans, because you can't go to see the Steelers where they are. And so to your point, but I think that also the hard part with football, American football as an example, is that it's really just built for TV. Like it is a sport that is built for TV. You get breaks every 10 seconds, you get 30 seconds to talk about it, and everyone gets to reframe, and you get to do a bunch of replays. I think other sports can be, much harder, and other events, but I think that, I do think that the scale of events is about to take off. Like we're already seeing, as some of the stuff that Obvio is working on, some of the stuff that we're working on, we see these numbers starting to get into where if you look at just I think that regardless of the politics, the Kamala Harris, and we talked about it a little bit before, and the Oprah event, that was, 300,000 people watching concurrent, watching an event that was very interactive and brought a lot of people in. I think that's we're starting to see that progression of the technology kind of also meeting with people's understanding of that technology.
Yeah. Jeff?
Regarding the interaction part of it in the game, I agree with what Roscoe was saying. It's the idea of seeing the game, but it's also about being around the people, and people watching a bit part of that too. But have you guys seen this new? I think they're based out of Dallas. I know they have a place in Dallas called COSM, COSM, and it's a big LED wall again. So it's kind of like a half a sphere, more or less. It's not near the size, but think of it like that. But it does have a bit of a curve to it. And okay, that was interesting. And then whenever it actually they play the game back, but it's framed in a way, and for different cameras, it's not just the broadcast view, but you're sitting in decked seating. So everybody kind of feels like you're in the middle of it, because it goes down below you, it goes above you. It's a pretty interesting idea to see how long it'll last. But watching something like that with a bunch of people, nice drinks, nice food,
I couldn't quite get the time. I really wanted to go to Cosm. I wanted to see something there, or, just couldn't work it out. It was in Dallas because they have one in Dallas, and
Yeah.
LA.
There's one in LA and Dallas. And that's the other one is in LA. Yeah.
Hmm.
And, the Sphere is the same way. I feel like the Sphere is almost too big. When I watch videos of there, I don't feel like I need to go. Like I did when it first came out, but I keep on seeing videos on it, and I'm like, the Eagles are really tiny. Like, like they're really small down there, and there's not enough IMAG. So they're doing all these visuals, but I'm not seeing the band. Like, like I think I started to fade at first I was getting more and more excited about going to the Sphere. And then the more videos I saw, the less excited I got, so I do think that there's a certain size, and I think Cosm has that better off. But I think the problem really is the amount of cost to build a Cosm space, and how long will it take to amortize is the thing that my big question. I bet you those are really expensive to build.
2 months.
2
quick.
months.
I would venture to say, from the size that I've seen and the estimates I did on the wall size,
Yeah,
But
right.
they could do it.
But I saw them, and it's just not that many seats, and so it's just, and again, I think that when you look at like what IMAX Live does, that's 30,000 people, that's there, and Fathom is hundreds of thousands of people. That the problem for a lot of the Fathom stuff is that the image and audio quality isn't as high as it could be. So, but I think
$22 for Thursday night football for general admission. It's pretty good. UFC was $50. And then they have a second.
You're talking
tier.
about at Cosm.
Yeah, Cosm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it costs like the NFL ticket costs essentially $15 a show, a game.
Hmm.
If you're only watching one team, it's $15 a game.
Guy?
Yeah, I haven't been lucky enough to have Bo give me a tour of Thursday Night Football's trucks. You see the amount of cameras and crew and shaders, and one of the things that makes those the end product so compelling is all those angles. So in the future, I think we're going to see more of these cameras like the AM7 from Sony. This will be about a $12,000 camera with really, really intelligent auto tracking. So I think we're going to have this opportunity to get more cameras so that there's more of a selection for close-ups, because that's really what you see in a lot of this NFL interaction is just this you're going wide, you're going close up, and you've got different angles. But then you also may have sub switches where you have, like for replay in that truck, that TD is not looking at all that replay. He's getting sold those shots, as Alex was saying. But imagine if the sub switch was AI and it could just say, okay, here's another 20 cameras that are all audience reaction shots. And the AI just knows that's a smile, that's a laugh, that's a cry. And it hits all those and then just bubbles up out of 20 cameras, just says, presents the TD these 3. And that's all automated, So this is the future, is where we're going to see more of this automation and AI going on into our productions, and it'll bring the cost down. So the at-home experience will become better and better.
I also think the Vision Pro is a big one. It's no coincidence that Tim Cook waved the flag at Formula One last year in Austin. So these things are, and like Eddie Q is a mad Formula One fan, so we know that he's in charge of essentially Apple TV of content. So I think the Vision Pro is going to be a big thing. It's just like we're only in it's kind of like iPhone 1 at the moment, so we don't really know the full potential of how people in the wider world are going to embrace the Vision Pro. And we don't know exactly how. We know content providers have got ideas, but it takes years for them to spin up these ideas because there needs to be a critical mass of the audience. So you've kind of got these two things. And as you say, Alex, you've actually, both you and Grant have one, and I'm sure you're both thinking about how you could use them. But pulling the trigger is a bit of a different thing because someone has to pay for it.
But I think that the missing piece here is not so much. There's enough people with Vision Pros. There's about 400,000 by most estimates of people that have it. You can build something around 10,000 viewers or 5,000 viewers that makes sense. The biggest problem is shooting it is live, especially, but shooting in general is a bit of an art project, and so the R5 does a pretty good job of it. So a lot of us are paying a lot of attention to Blackmagic's new camera that is built in conjunction with Apple. If they're able to get 8K per eye at 90 frames a second, if that actually happens, and if they can get even half that resolution out of the back of the camera live, I think that there's an explosion of opportunity. And if that camera is less than 25,000, which, we haven't seen Blackmagic do I don't think they've done a camera over 20, maybe the new
The new
17K
one's
might be
30,
more,
yeah, 30,000 for the
but I think this camera is going to be, if it's 30,000 or less, which, remember, that's a rental of $1,500, $2,000, somewhere in that range, to use it for a show. I think that changes a lot, because now it's a turnkey system. You turn it on and you can start capturing footage. I'm finding even just with the phone, it's a relatively compelling, thing to watch, and very portable and easy to use. But when you have a real camera shooting hemispheres, that isn't an art project, like that just turns on and puts out the footage or just captures the footage, I think that's the big game changer. Because right now you really have to know what you're doing to shoot good stereo.
Yeah, Bo, it's a great question, and it kind of relates a little to our hybrid discussion that we've been talking about. But because I think it's a totally different thing, and I think that you go to a game to experience all of it, and to sport, and you sit at home to actually watch it and to really view it all. It's a different thing, and Formula One's a great example. Um, that Formula One is a totally different experience when you can hear it and smell it, and you can feel it in as the cars go by, you can feel it in your chest. That's a different experience than watching it at home. But there's no question that if you want to know everything about what's going on with that race, you want to watch it. You're going to see it better than sitting in the stand. And I think it's the same with lots of sport. So
Well, I
very
think
good.
also, like, if you look at like golf, like we streamed golf. I don't know why someone would go to see golf. Like, I mean, like, go to the actual golf course to sit there and watch it, because you're sitting, you have to jockey for position to where you're going to sit or stand. And then you're there the whole time. And all you see is someone come by and hit that one green or hit that one, like and it's a lot to go from one place to the other, and you're not going to get a good position after you've moved. Or you can watch it on TV. Now, what the Open does, and we worked on this for a little while, is stream it internally. So they stream it so you can open up your phone if you're on Wi-Fi. There's like 270 access points or whatever, and you could do it on Wi-Fi. You can just look down and look at all the other holes, like look at everything else that's going on. Look at the BBC broadcast, and so that made it much more doable. But I think there are certain sports that are definitely way better, to watch on TV than they are to be at.
Yeah, you can't hear the thwack of the golf ball quite like that, like but
Yeah.
standing right there. That's what they want to hear. They're like, that was a good hit because I heard that it was a good hit.
The best part of being at the Open is the haggis. I really
Right.
like. I really enjoyed the
All this
haggis.
extra stuff. All right. Last question.
Last one in from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, BC, and he asks, is VisVector doing any kind of sharpening and or upscaling when encoding to 4K? The quality looks great.
Jeff?
It's probably a little bit of a couple different things. Is it doing scaling? Yes, technically the session that it's working in is a 4K session. So we're feeding it over NDI from the Zoom room. The Zoom room is usually adjusting everybody here at 1080 as long as the internet's good, right? So 1080p, it's getting into the frame sinks that are in each input on the VisVector. And then at that point, it is upscaled effectively into the session. And then at that, the next step after that is the streaming engine. So it's after the switcher section, and then the streaming engine is taking the output, which is part of Vector, but it's a separate module that's streaming it out at 4K. So technically, I guess you would say it is upscaling everybody in a way.
Yeah, there's two things. I think Taylor is doing an amazing job, and so that's what's making it look better. And our makeup as well. I think we all put on a little bit extra. Yeah, just make that look a little nicer. But yeah, it is interesting to compare. And John, we have to compare sometime. You were doing a comparison sort of at one point as well to a live stream of the ATEM workflow. and seeing, did you sort of compare those a little bit? Was it a little less saturated or something? Is that what
Yeah,
we're
it seems
doing?
to be a little bit more yellow coming out of the NDI feeds versus what we're getting.
Hmm.
It's even interesting to see like the program that we feed into the show versus what the output is. If
Mm.
you look at like the ZR production O2 over here, like the color differences in between those two. So and we see the same thing with the internal system. So it's interesting how Zoom and everything handles everything throughout the entire pipeline. It's definitely different. Um, and we're getting, we're not getting great feeds into Zoom. But as we are able to increase bandwidth, that will drastically change and the upscales will look even better, which I'm looking forward to.
Very good. Well, we've already ran over our CD limit in our time. So we've gone over 74 minutes. We've gone up to 90 minutes. And our back end team need to get off to some other things. And so we're going to finish it there. Thank you, everyone. There's a few questions we pushed back. They can be pushed to the daily show, or you can wait till next week when we'll do this all again. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.